wind that makes waves. But there's three things about the wind that's important. One is how fast the wind blows. So the faster the wind blows, the bigger the waves will be. The second is how long the wind blows for. If it blows for a few minutes, nothing will happen. But if it blows for a few hours or a few days, you will get big waves. Now, if you're going in the water and you see these dumping waves, you've got to get your timing right. But if you got your timing wrong and this big thing's about to break on you, don't stand there. Get underneath. Dive into the water, hands out, hug the bottom, and you'll be okay. When you come out, don't turn your back on the waves. Okay? People get whiplash all the time. They get hit, their neck goes back, they get hurt. Always look behind you and just get your timing right. So you should always body surf with one arm or two arms out in front of you. So if you go over, you hit your arms and not your head. When you see waves break and you see white water, that means the water's been let go. So all this white water is moving to the beach, okay? Now, you can't have water piling up on the beach all day long or else we'd all be underwater. It's got to go back out somehow. And that's when we start to get rips. And if you don't know what rips are, the easiest definition is I call them rivers of the ocean. And just like rivers, they sit in a deep channel between shallow banks, right? And they flow in one direction. Well, same with rips. Most rips sit in a deep channel between shallow sandbanks, and they take the water in one direction. And they're there to get that water back out. Now, to me, there's a really obvious rip in this picture. But if you don't know where the rip is, what you need to do is look here. There's lots of white water, but then there's a green gap. Now, I've got this nice saying called white is nice, green is mean. White is nice because the white water means it's shallow, you can stand up, that water brings you back to the beach, whereas these green gaps are deep water and they could be rips, so they're mean. And that's the rip. They look like these green paths or gaps, almost like roads, going out through the surf. That's what you got to look for. Now, this is how they work. I've got an animation. This is from Tamarama. So the waves bring the water in, it meets in the middle, it finds that channel, or it makes its own, it flows offshore. That's a lot of water moving out, and if you try swimming against that, you're not going to make it unless you're Thorpe. They're really strong. But the good thing is they're easy to understand. There's only two things you really need to remember. One is that waves break in shallow water. So wherever you see waves breaking and there's white water, it means it's shallow. That's a sandbank, sandbar. The second thing is that waves don't break as much in deeper water. So you don't see any waves breaking out there because it's deep. And you also don't see many waves breaking in here because it's what we call a deep channel or gutter or trough. Now, rips do not take you to New Zealand. That's a myth. They take you about as far as the waves are breaking, maybe a bit further. And they're all about breaking waves. If it was flat calm, no rips. But as soon as waves break, you start to get them. So if the waves were bigger, well, then the rip would go out further. Now, one of the things here I mentioned is that so many people get in trouble in rips because they actually look like great places to swim. They look safe. And every year we'll get a family from the country or from overseas, they'll go to the beach, they don't really know how beaches work, and they go, where should we put the kids in to swim? Well, that looks pretty nasty, we won't put them there. That looks pretty nasty, we won't put them there. But that looks great, nice and clean and calm. So they put the kids in and off they go. And then the parents go in and off they go as well. It happens every year. And that's one of the problems. A lot of people call rips rip tides. They're not a tide, okay? But rips are affected by the tide. So rips flow faster around low tide. So 2 hours either side of low tide, things are shallow, waves are breaking, the rips move pretty quickly. At high tide, things are deep, the channel isn't a big deal because it's deep and the rips can stop. All our surf beaches have rips, but if you go to the northern beaches, freshwater is a pretty flat beach, which is really good for learning how to surf. Now, it's always harder to spot these things from the beach. So what we do is we chuck in the purple dye because it's fun. Now, this rip went straight out. They don't always do that. They can go at angles, they can do S-bends, they can do all sorts of crazy stuff. But rips are there to bring all that water from the beach back offshore. So once they do that, they stop. They've done their job. And in this case, all the water and all the dye went out, and it came back in with the waves, and it made a complete circle. So if you'd been stuck in that rip and you'd done nothing but just float, you would have had a nice little ride, but in a few minutes, you would have been standing up safe and sound in the sandbar. And that's why if you ever do get caught in a rip, don't panic. I know it's easy to say when the beach is disappearing that you shouldn't panic, but there's reasons. One is that The rips do not pull you under the water. People call them undertow. There's nothing in the ocean that pulls you under and holds you there. People say, what does it feel like being caught in a rip? It doesn't feel like anything because you're just going with the water. So do not panic. Panic is what drowns people. People get scared. It affects their breathing. You take in some water, you can drown in 30 seconds, okay? And if you're not a good swimmer and you're on an unpatrolled beach, never go in past your waist. Because if you lose your footing and you get caught in a rip, you don't feel it, right? And then you look up and, gee, you're out here. How did I get here? So your reaction is to swim back to the beach against the rip. And you swim, and you go backwards. And then you swim faster. And then you go backwards, and then you get tired, and you get scared. So don't swim against it. The best advice at the moment is just stay afloat, okay? Because we can all float. Even if you're not a good swimmer, our bodies are designed to float. Lay on your back, move your arms and legs. Signal for help from the lifeguards, lifesavers, surfers, right? Somebody will come and get you, but just stay afloat and relax. Swim between the flags. You must swim between the flags. If you don't, you need to know how to spot rips. That's the bottom line.